do. Hey, do. Divine Rise, blessed be to your day. May it be everything you require to create everything that you desire. As we're getting into deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole we go to explore ourselves. To win the day, we got to understand the night before. That means in order to bring new things, in order to start taking the opportunity of moving in our new light, in our new energy, in our new self, we got to remove that old mental filter. We got to look at how we're mentally filtering our lives. Mental filtering is the point or the aspect of, guys, I got everything looking all good, yeah. Mental filtering is the aspect of taking the negatives and magnifying the negatives and not looking at the positives. It's like, if I'm only paying attention to the car wreck, I don't pay attention to my gas tank on E or my low fuel tank. If I'm only concentrating on my physical hunger being fed or my urges being fed, my necessities being taken care of, I never learn where I'm really hungry. I never learn where I'm really hungry. I never learn I never get to learn the real or the truer aspects of myself. I never get to learn those aspects. This is when we come into the cognitive distortion. Remember, everything outside of you is a reflection point of you to experience and or observe. A lot of times we stay stuck in our experiences. Remember, I talked about it yesterday, based on suffering. We stay in our older aspects based on suffering. Let me clean the screen real quick. I don't like the way the camera got me looking like I'm all fuzzy and stuff. All right, cool. But that's cool. We got that right there. But I'm looking at myself in the old aspects. I'm looking at myself in my old aspects because I'm stuck within this suffering narrative or this oppressive narrative. And being stuck in this space, it kind of affects my self-talk. And I used to look at my self-talk, and my self-talk was based on being deserving based on what I've been through. I'm deserving of something because I've been through this. This has happened to me, so I deserve love. I deserve peace. I deserve happiness. I deserve these aspects. But if I'm not putting in the work to myself, if I'm not putting in that work with myself, if I'm not assessing my goals, seeing if my goals match my routines, or my routines are based on my old goals, or based on old patterns, not really goals. If I'm not going deeper, then I'm always going to remain on the surface, or I'm going to remain in this sense of the cognitive distortion. I'm going to stay distorting by looking for the negatives and magnifying the negatives in others. I'm going to look at my job and blame my job for me not having the money to do what I want to do. But in reality, it's not my job, it's my budgeting. It's me not understanding it's not me understanding emotional literacy, so I damn well ain't got financial literacy. Because I'm reacting to a sale, I'm reacting to a trip, or I'm reacting to something, rather than learning how to respond and remove that distortion that's in my space, that distortion, or this false sense of value, my false sense of purpose, my false sense of potential. Think about your space. I want you to think about your space. Your space is your first opportunity. So if I'm looking at my space right now and my space is in order, then 9 times out of 10, even when I get anxious, anxiety pops up because my space is now in order. Now I used to remember like cleaning up my space, and I would feel good. I would feel great. I'd be like, yeah, my space is in order. Everything's real good in my space. But then this anxiety would come in. This anxiety for me seeing something that was dirty. This anxiety would come in for me seeing something that was out of place. So I had to really look at, I would negify something being out of place because reacting to it. So if I see, let's say walk into my crib and it doesn't smell right. The fuck is that smell? Oh shit, I forgot to take out the garbage. Instead of reacting like a lot of us do in that space, we'll react. Especially if you think about when you're in a relationship and think about when you're in a relationship, you got roommates, whatever it may be, and you sitting inside of your space. You walk in your house after a long day of work. Walk into your house after a long day of work, and you smell the trash. You smell the trash hasn't been taken out. And now you got somebody in your space, roommate, living, significant other, whatever it may be, is inside the space. Or I think about it with the aspect of kids. Even when I was little, I remember this always being a trigger point for me as an example. This was always a trigger point for me. Like I walk in the house and the garbage didn't get taken out. But now, where did it come from? Where is this animosity, this anxiety coming from? It's time for me to reflect on where I learned that from. That's why it's coming into your space. But that cognitive distortion, we're keeping in that line of that cognitive distortion, this mental filter based on my value, based on my worth, based on my necessities, what I'm searching for instead of looking for myself. I'll use that distortion. I'll blow that shit up. But what am I really not dealing with? It's the same thing that happened with your mom and your dad. And then it's the same thing that happened with your mom and your dad. Or if you had a single mother, you were in a single parent household and your mom got upset because nobody took out the trash. And we've all heard that argument. Ain't nobody take out the trash. I work hard all day, and all I do is ask y'all to pull out the chicken. It's not you. But we took that response as it was us. You see, when we're going through this development cycle with ourselves, especially with the inner child, we go through this process and we set goals based on necessity. So now I'm looking at my space and I'm reflecting that into my current space. That person that's inside of your space is a reflection of you. That object, that trash being inside of my space, is a reflection of the aspect of me. Why is it about, so as you start doing this, as I started doing this in my earlier work, it was about removing the distraction or assessing the distraction, learning from the distraction. Now for me, using as an example, I don't have to worry about the trash being in the trash can, because now when I wake up, getting ready for the gym, clearing out my day, trash symbolizes clearing out my day. So I grab the trash out the trash can, put a new bag in, set the trash by the door. When I'm walking down the stairs, pop the trunk, put the trash in the trunk. Instead of me going right to go out of my complex, I go left to go dump it into the dumpster. Then I go on about my day. This is removing the distortion. This is removing the aspect of the external need or that external want. Remember, your necessities, cooking, cleaning, staying organized, those are basic necessities that are defined by your standard, your internal standard. So now if you find yourself, because we've all found ourselves in this state of anxiety, this when we go so far outside of ourselves, we become obsessive compulsive with a lot of shit. And we want our space to be a certain way, but why? What does it represent? See, you have to define your space. See, my space, I'm within my living room, basically. I do my consultations, the readings, therapy sessions. It's all done from this space. So it's all done from this space. This is the opportunity for me to keep the energy balanced inside of my space. So I don't have to, I'm not dependent upon anything or anyone beloved to do anything in this space because I'm taking away the distraction. Because this is how I started realizing this, especially with my thinking about the relationship with my mother and how my mother would be upset about that, or my pops would be upset about the trash not being taken out, this not being clean. That anger was being displaced. A lot of times when you're inside of your space, your anger, you're displacing your anger. That's why you react to certain things. That's why you keep certain things inside of your space to react a certain way. Because there's something else that you're not dealing with. There's something else that you're not assessing. I remember all the fucking time, like, I remember one night in particular, I think I was like 13, 14, probably like 13 to 14. I remember we did the dishes. Pops came home late from Pops came home late. We laying in the bed. Everybody about to go to sleep. My pops woke me up. My pops woke me up out of bed and asked, did I do the dishes? I was like, yes, I did the dishes. Come here real quick. My pops took me into the kitchen, and he had a fork sitting on the dish towel. He was like, look at that fork. And I'm looking at the fork, and I'm half asleep, mind you. I'm looking at the fork, and he's like, what's wrong with that fork? The fork's still dirty. I was like, we didn't use fork. That's only one fork. But you did the dishes. I was like, yeah. So you washed that fork? I was like, no. So who washed that fork? I said, I don't know, whoever ate last. Instead of him being able to accept where he was wrong, or he falsely accused me of it, or listening to what I said, he went off. Like, this is being dirty. He went off. He could not accept that aspect. So for me, sitting in that space, him taking that negative and expanding it past, not looking at the positive, that I sat here and told him the truth. Yeah, I washed the dishes. That fork was there before I got. That fork must have came after I ate. Later on down the line, I found out that my brother went in there and my mom made peach cobbler for dinner, and he had some peach cobbler, and then he heard my pops, so he quickly washed the dish and threw it into the thing. Later on, I found this out. But at that point in time, that left a mark on my shit. That left a mark in my emotional memory. So now when I'm going into other spaces, now when I have a chance in my current, or in a current situation of current, I'm still feeding from that space. This is how we have to understand these mental blocks, or these cognitive distortions, that self-talk, that emotional aspect that got you locked in a certain space. Instead of you making something bigger than it actually is, how are you having that conversation with yourself? I made that post with as things come into your space, how does it affect you? We always want to look at the external to try to keep the external in narrative, not understanding that the internal, remember your internal, the external is reacting to your internal. So the way that you see things based on your perspective creates the perception and the way you project. So if I'm not looking at myself inside of that space, and I keep doing this same cycle of events, that's what I keep looking for, because that's what keeps me in that space. That's what filter I need in order to survive within that aspect of that identity. That's what I need. That's what I echo out in. So now when I'm going into a space, it's time for me to start assessing, instead of me looking at motherfuckers always keep coming in my space, and I'm like, motherfuckers is so messy and full of drama, and they always talking about and gossiping and all this shit. Why they keep coming in my space? Why they keep befriending me? Why they keep coming around me? Instead of me saying this, why me? I'm entitled to better. I'm trying to better my life. I'm going to school, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Instead of me paying attention to the externals of what I'm doing, I got to look at what I've done. That internal forces you to look at what you've done. It forces you to accept what you've done, and it forces you to take responsibility in what you've done. How have you been assessing your space? You have a whole negative quotient sitting on the table about you having a goal, but what is your routine reflecting to that goal? Is your goal based on you stepping out of your comfort zone? Or is your routine basically to maintain a certain pattern? For a long time for my life, I was living out that pattern. The way that I was raised based on survival, in that example, the way that I was raised based on survival, the way that my pops did things, the way that my mother reacted to things. So it's like, now in order to not act like my mother in certain instances, I gotta act like my pops. In order not to act like my pops in certain instances, I gotta go into the feminine aspect and use the emotions based on my mother. So for up 10 years of my life, that's how I was reacting to everything. I would magnify negatives to avoid my own negatives. I would have conversations and I sounded condescending. I always had a biased point of projection every time I went into a space because my self-talk was only based on the external. Remember, your internal standards and your external standards, they two different things. A lot of the times we keep having these conversations with yourselves. You say that you're great, but you're saying that you're great because of what you went through and everything, all the shit you already went through, all the shit that already happened. That's why you good. I'm good because I have a job. I'm good because I got a degree. I'm good because I did this. I'm good because I can do this. I'm good because I make money. I'm good because of this, this, and this. Depending upon the external. But this is how I've talked about this before when it comes into the aspect of independence. There's a difference between independence and understanding that I am self-efficient. I'm self-reliant. See, your independence is based upon the deserving based upon entitlement. So since you're so independent, where did you learn your realm of independence? As opposed to becoming self-sufficient. These are the things that we have to look at. You're looking at a sense of independence because a lot of us look at a sense that we're independent because we are no longer, because we're running away from the struggle. We're running away from our struggle. We're running away from our emotions. So the longer that I'm independent, the longer I ain't got to take accountability for my emotions, for how I talk, for how I speak, for how I react. I'm independent. I'm real. You don't understand. It's hard. It's hard out here in America for a black man to survive because everybody's against us. So now, remember, your external, the environment is reacting to you. Your environment is reacting to you. So naturally, you're only magnifying your internal conflicts that you've not assessed, and they manifest into your space as those oppositions. There's a difference between looking for the opposition or the antagonist or the protagonist or those emotional markers and bringing yourself to a point where you don't need those. You see, you can use your job. I remember using my job for a long period of time. My job was my opposition. It was my protagonist when I needed it to be, and it was my antagonist when I needed it to be. When my hours dropped, my job was my antagonist. But now since I had an antagonist on one half, I needed a protagonist. So I needed somebody to go talk to about my job. So now I'm around other people that are talking about their job. Yeah, my job cut my hours too and da-da-da-da. So I'm staying in that negative cycle because I'm magnifying it to stay at that antagonist. But the moment that my job gave me a day off, gave me my vacation time, I was like, oh, hell yeah, my job is great. But now that same space that I created those the pros or the old protagonists to me not liking my job, now they looking at me as, oh man, you must be lucky to get that vacation. damn, I wish my job give me a vacation. I wish I could get some fucking time off, because it's in the same space. You're not moving anywhere. You keep making this same triangular state of events instead of understanding that you got to go higher. You see, when we're stuck in that cognitive distortion, you take that triangle, you keep going down. Everything you do is set to go down. See, when I started taking it into the assessment and changed my self-talk and changed my patterns and assessing my patterns, looking at my habits, looking at my behaviors, how I was reacting to shit. Now, when I started having those thoughts didn't go down to keep me stuck in survival mode. They went into the higher aspect. So now I can look at what my mind was reflecting. But I had to accept that it was on me. I had to accept my space. Why I don't see myself doing certain things. Why was it, instead of me looking at others to find opposition, yo, you got to do this, this, and this, and then this, this, and this. If you don't do it, then fine, whatever. I was already set in that mindset. I already had an expectancy that didn't nobody know how to do what I did. So that was based on my independence. That was based on me being the best. Or being the best on the external. Having a bunch of things in my space on the external to keep me moving in that same motion. You don't understand. You don't understand what I've been through. In reality, remember, you're talking to yourself. So you're looking for somebody to agree with you. Yeah, I don't understand what you've been through, but I mean, everybody been through some hard, man, I ain't trying to hear that. You ain't been through what I've been through. You don't understand me. What I'm really saying to myself in reality, I don't understand myself. Man, it's hard to trust people. What I'm really saying is I don't really trust myself. Man, you don't know people until some hard shit go on, and then you really get to know who your true friends are. In reality, I wouldn't even went into that position. I could have used discernment if I really started to understand myself. It always falls back to you. It's always going to fall back onto you. It's always going to be based in the analysis of you. I'm sitting there, my heart hurting and shit, going through heart pains. My shit ain't, I'm always talking through hurt because I'm rooted still in the hurt, and I'm expecting things to come into my space to take care of my necessities. This happens a lot of times when you go into that trauma bond or that relationship, especially when you looking at the relationships. The relationships is based on ownership. It's based on the employee catalog, that associate or the employee catalog, that ownership. You have this much time, you've done this much work, you do this, this, and this to maintain all of these things. Now you sitting inside your space. Now you want employees. That's how you stay independent. You have employees. Self-sufficiency is me understanding how everybody in my space works with me. Whether or not, that way I can now make the clean separation. See, a lot of times we'll get stuck in that aspect. Give you a question. If you have a problem trusting people, or you can't trust people, then what is keeping you attached? What's making it so you can't step away from it? If you know that you cannot, if you have this thought in your mind, you can't trust your mother, you can't get along with your mother, what's the emotional attachment that keeps bringing that back into your space? If you know that somebody's not up to par with your life, what's keeping you inside of that space? Your expectancy, that emotional attachment. You needed them to keep you in the state of you staying the protagonist. You looking at people with their dreams. That's like, we've seen that shit before. You got motherfuckers out here with mixtapes. You trying to support your man dream or your woman dream, or hell, even when you're trying to support your kids' dreams. Why are you so dead set on supporting that? There's nothing wrong with the support of others' dreams and goals. The problem or the problematic aspect in that distortion is when you're looking at their dreams and goals and you're trying to become what is needed for their dreams and goals to take root based on using your basics, your necessity. Instead of you looking, because a lot of times we come into that space, and I've seen this so many times, I've dealt with this so many times, seeing people in that space, and you see somebody chasing their dreams, setting up their business, putting in that work, and now you're looking at them, since you're based on ownership, since you're based on that employee dialogue, you're like, but what about me? I remember a lot of times for myself, the thing that I worried about a lot was motherfuckers outdoing me or leaving me behind. My separation anxiety, my separation, my abandonment, my neglect, my rejection. But on the other end of that aspect, I was still stuck on rejection. So now when people are coming to me, I can reject them. But on the other end of that rejection, I couldn't take rejection from others. You see, you're still stuck in the polarity of that space, of that balance. You feel good sitting here in this center spot, and you're sitting there looking at people based on what they're not able to do for you and what you're able to do for them. So it keeps you in a state of comfort. So now you keep using that same cognitive distortion to be like, in that same sentence, you help them out, and now your energy's low, and you wondering why motherfuckers ain't have to learn. You sitting there. Now you upset with them in the same space that you were good with them. On the other side of that, you're reflecting your fears from that other point. So now you have a fear of not being good enough. So what do you project? Motherfuckers ain't good enough for you. Remember, it always flips. Just like when you take that light into your eyes, it turns that shit upside, it turns it around. You looking at motherfuckers like, you ain't good enough for me. But in reality, look deep inside of yourself. Where did you see yourself not being good enough? What shadow? Who told you that when you were younger? Who told you that over and over and over again? Who helped you build that space? It's time to assess that space. You can keep doing the same shit that you're doing, but it's time to assess that space. It's time to deal with the shit that's in your roots. It's time to deal with the things that are keeping you out of balance with your confidence levels. It's time to deal with those things that are affecting your power. It's time to deal with those things that are stuck on your heart. It's time to assess. It's time to address. Because all you're going to do is keep speaking from that hurt. Maintaining your pattern. Staying locked within that position with yourself. You're your own opposition. You're your own opposition. I was my own worst enemy. I'm still I was my own worst enemy. I was my own worst judge. So since I was judging myself as I talked about yesterday and in the podcast, that irregular introspective of myself, I had a irregular introspective of others. I only saw them through a certain bias. So even when I delivered information, it was more emotional. It only came up after a buildup. I couldn't say it without the fear being there or to try to hurt somebody. And you think about when you say it. When I get angry, my mouth get reckless. That's not cute. That's not cute. When I get angry, my mouth get reckless. When I'm down and my back against the wall, I get reckless. Why? Where did you learn that shit from? How did you develop that? Because I can tell you that that's not the way to move. There'll be times when you may have to move that way in certain aspects for yourself, but that shouldn't be your go-to. It's time to assess it's time to assess that go-to. It's time to assess why whenever that happens, this cognitive distortion happens in your life, you magnify that negative, and then you start acting in that sense of that behavior. And then say, yo, you shouldn't have made me mad. You shouldn't have made me upset. You should have did this. You should have did that. They're not your employee. You're not my employee. We don't work for each other. We work with each other. We learn from each other. That's the opening of that space based on ownership. That's the opportunity to learn with the new options. That's the success based in your growth. that's moving away from emotional sabotage. And that's what we getting into tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the God Hour Show. We're going to get a little bit deeper. I like the little bill we just did. We're going to get a little bit deeper tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the God Hour Show. We're going to get into the roots of emotional sabotage, live readings. Tune in to tap out. Also, God Hour Podcast is streaming now. This week's episode, we got into the nothingness, the fighting the path of no self, available everywhere. And as always, also, everything from readings, consultations, getting ready for the shadow work sessions, everything that you need is in front of you. This is your opportunity to really do the work. But you got to shed that entitlement to get to that vulnerability, to get to know and trust yourself. Something got to be taken away in order for you to be able to bring something in. Can't hold it all. I want you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the fucking best as always. But yeah, I see y'all tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come get your fill. Get a reading. Come get a little more information. We don't be getting into that emotional sabotage. I love you. We love us. Ashe.